Okay.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How are you? Good. I'm Jordan Hayes. I'm a peer mentor for disability rights and resources. And can everyone on Zoom hear me? Are they set to unmute themselves, or do we need to do that? Yep. Okay. I see some thumbs up, so we're good. Okay. So I came to talk about my employment experience as a person with a disability, and you can't really see, but I am a white woman in a power wheelchair with blonde hair and glasses. So for me, as a person that has changed mobility over time, this has really been a challenge of the self and of my identity to navigate employment post wheelchair, or entering a wheelchair. So that's why I have this mouthful title, Abandoning Visions of the Poster Child on the Path to Fulfilling Employment. If you're not familiar with a poster child in reference to disability, it's basically the cute kid that grins and bears the difficulty of moving across the stage outside of their mobility device. And that was me growing up. I was not photogenic enough, I suppose, to be the actual poster child, but I had an incredible need to show people that I could do it without mobility aids. And ultimately that didn't really help me. I needed the supports, I needed the access to do well. So what does that have to do with my employment history? I really internalized the idea that I needed to hide disability. Pre-wheelchair, I didn't have to really disclose it. I had a limp that was noticeable, but a lot of people would shrug that off. So once I started working, I really looked for jobs that would conceal my disability for a long time. My first job that I used my wheelchair in was a modeling job on my university campus. I was just posing for portraits in the fine arts department. And at that time, I switched between a cane and my wheelchair. So I come into the interview, the instructor sees my cane, and he says, "Are you sure you're going to be able to do this job?" And, the job is sitting still. Yes, I'm sure I can do it. So that to me it should have been more of a red flag for me at the time, but I was like, this fits in my class schedule. It gets the job done. So I told him I could do the job, and I did. But then in one of the sessions, I ended up getting locked into the building because of how inaccessible it was. They had one push button entrance, and it locked at 7:30. And then I was in the building after hours because the class went to, I believe it was 8. And all the students didn't use wheelchairs and they didn't need the power button. So they turn it off at the end of the evening. So I had to go and hunt down a professor to unlock the door for me and help me get to the only exit with a ramp. So when, I have time to reflect on it, looking back, his gesture towards my cane, asking if I was capable of the job, is a red flag for me, just an attitude, like, you don't know anything about me yet. Then reasonable accommodations weren't even considered. Of course, I could do the job, but the way he asked was just, "Can you really?" And then the next thing is that the job site itself was inaccessible. So for me now, when I'm looking for jobs, I take notice of inaccessible interviewing locations, lack of accessibility information available. If they can't tell me how accessible their building is, then I'm concerned. I also dislike people avoiding the word disability altogether, or in this case, like that instructor, using it with a negative connotation or spin. So in my next job, which was an internship at a center for people with disabilities, so I was already kind of in the peer role looking to do work in the disability field. They asked for a full medical history. Again, the job did not require a full medical history. The building was supposed to be accessible because it catered to folks who also used mobility aids. So there's, more red flags of accessibility. No, not really. So, but I was a student at the time and wasn't really in the mindset to pursue legal action. My professor who had arranged the internship, he basically said, well, you don't drive and this building should be accessible because they already work with people like you. And it was just really like, here's your option. You need it to graduate. So yeah, all of this had an effect where it places me as the person with a disability in a situation that my disability is becoming a barrier. They're situating it, these professors and former instructors, in a way that my having access needs is a me problem and not a structural, architectural, attitudinal thing to consider. So you do not have to answer more medical questions than are necessary, especially not in the interview phase. They don't need to know. And really, you don't have to disclose right there in the interview. For me, it's mostly apparent, except in the era of Zoom interviews, I've not had to, I could not disclose at this time, but I have gotten to a place where it's right there, it's front and center, and I'll tell you first thing. Well, maybe not first, my name and who I am, but that is a part of who I am. And it's really been important to me to find a workplace that is affirming of that identity, because disability is not just my physical or medical condition. It's also a part of who I am and have been forever. So now I work at Disability Rights and Resources as a peer mentor, and it is clear that my disability is a valuable asset to my work. I think it provides an opportunity to really support our consumers and let them know that I know what they're going through. I know where to find the resources. I have also felt like I'm the barrier, I am the problem, but it's not true. So when you see employers that are positioning your identity as part of the issue, that's not the employer for you. You're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. And if you hear something that you don't like about disability, if you hear them avoiding the phrase a person with a disability or considering it a negative, you don't have to work for them. There is someone else out there. Do not feel like you are stuck or that you're limited in your options. You are valuable, and employers that are interested in being more inclusive will accommodate. They will be interested in your lived experience. So really, I think I had worked on a positive disability identity myself, but this job as a peer mentor has really improved my sense of self in a positive way. I get a lot of calls from consumers who have just recently acquired a disability or have moved to a new state and they're not sure where their resources are, and they're starting to feel like they don't belong. And it is so amazing to be able to say to them that you belong wherever you are. And there are resources out here, and access and support is possible. So, all right. Here on this slide, I just have some key takeaways from my personal experience, and also some more general advices. Remember, you're interviewing the employer just as much. You do not have to accept a job. You do not have to feel as though you're impressing them and nothing else. Like, they should impress you some when you interview them, when you're in an interview. If they offer you a job, it's because they already believe you're a qualified individual. Do not fall into the trap of thinking you are not qualified because of a disability. You can perform the essential job duties with or without reasonable accommodations. Reasonable accommodations should be an ongoing process, conversation with your employer. And, I am very lucky to have an employer that makes sure that it's really a conversation we have. Whenever I mention that I'm having trouble with something, it's not a scary, intimidating request. It is an open conversation about how I can do my job better and how I can make this work. Again, you're not obligated to disclose disability until or unless you're requesting a reasonable accommodation. I personally, again, I like to disclose. I think it gives me a better sense of who I'm working with, and the kinds of attitudes towards disability that I'm going to see in the workplace. It's just, that's my personal preference. If you are not going to request reasonable accommodations and you do not want to disclose, you do not have to. And this last one is especially important to me. I found it really relevant in my lived experience as the former poster child wannabe. Do not mistake pushing yourself beyond your limits. In my case, if I tried to walk everywhere in my office, that would be too much. Don't mistake that for challenging yourself to do better. Know where your limitations are. Examine your motivations for doing what you're doing. Take care of yourself. And then I have an image over here to the side. I'm sorry I didn't describe it, but it's just the universal sign for wheelchair user, and they're parked at the desk here, and the desk is gray and blue, cluttered with some books. So I had to make it somewhat realistic of my own desk. And up in the corner, we have a little sticky note, which is also a hint to what my desk looks like, with the title of this slide, Key Takeaways. All right, there's a couple of comments in the chat. I'm just gonna check that real quick. Okay, there's a PDF of the presentation. If you would like to look through the presentation on your own. Here on this last slide, we have some additional resources about reasonable accommodations. Like I said, I have requested reasonable accommodations in both work and school experiences. As a student, I had reasonable accommodations for like consideration of absences, because I have a disability that will change and fluctuate quite a bit from day to day. So if you're wondering about reasonable accommodations, if you have a disability that you're not sure how they would accommodate, then Jan, the Job Accommodation Network, has a list of ideas, suggestions, scenarios where so-and-so has this kind of disability and this is a reasonable accommodation that works. But again, it's an open conversation, continuing conversation with your employer or your supervisor. And if you're having trouble performing a task at work and you think there's an accommodation that would help, just talk to them about what's doable and what's reasonable. If you have a specific question about an accommodation, especially in the workplace, and you live in Mecklenburg, here in Charlotte, Union, Gaston, or Cabarrus, Marty Musser has been kind enough to offer her contact information for us. She's our advocacy coordinator here at Disability Rights and Resources, and she's happy to answer more specific questions about reasonable accommodations or protections under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act here. Are there any questions about any of this or more details that you're curious about?
Some questions of kind of like on continuing conversation on accommodations at work. I can also pause if that's something.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I think. So hi, I'm Ryan.
Nice to
I
meet you.
think a lot of our students in conversations they've been kind of explaining that they're actually like not quite sure what to do if an employer flat out is like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so could you talk a little bit about like navigating that situation? If there's something that folks should do like to prepare for that, or like what you would suggest when they face an employer and it's like, I don't think that's a reasonable accommodation, I'm not going to provide that.
So in my experience, I've had a couple of folks who are more hesitant about an accommodation. And what's worked for me is that I come in willing to explain what it is that I'm having trouble with. Like with the accommodation for like leniency on absences in classes, I had a lot of pushback from professors about that one. Just because a lot of people have this, I think it's a misconception that you will take advantage of a reasonable accommodation. So I had to really have more conversations than I anticipated, explaining that, yes, I have a chronic pain condition and I can experience a flare-up and I really don't know what's going to trigger it and when or to what extent. Like today, I would say I'm probably about a 5 on the 1 to 10 pain scale. And that's pretty tolerable for me now after, I don't know, like 12 years with this chronic pain condition. But when I was younger, it was not tolerable to be at a 5. That was like, let me take some medication and go to bed.
Well, would cancel class at a 3. If they felt a 3, they would cancel class. Like,
yeah. I have a sniffle. I have to, yeah. So I did have professors that were really wary of the reasonable accommodation. And, you know, I would tell them pretty flat out, like, I don't miss a lot of class. I don't miss a lot of things that I've agreed to do. Sometimes I'm going to need to, just like any other student. And for folks that were a little bit more resistant to it, even after explaining, and because my chronic pain condition is kind of rare and the triggers are mysterious, even to medical professionals, I would have to disclose a little bit more. And I can understand that that's a problem for a lot of folks to try to hold on to their privacy. I'm pretty open about what I experience and how my disability impacts me. But again, I've had a disability all of my life, so I'm pretty used to having the conversation. So really just if you are experiencing resistance, make sure that they know it doesn't have to be the one thing that you've come in requesting. Like, okay, you can't do this, so what's the next best thing I can get? How can we meet in the middle here? And then if they're not receiving that at all, you've really, I mean, then it gets trickier. But I find that most people are willing to take the next best thing, or with more explanation, they're okay with providing it. I did have one professor who I dropped their class. You know, once we had multiple conversations and I couldn't get across to them, and I had shared with them a lot of information about my disability. You know, I was in a position where that was acceptable. It was an elective course and I did not need it. But in employment, it can certainly be more challenging, and you may not always be in the position to just find a new job, or at least not right away. But I mean, that is an option later down the line. Like, no, I went to Winthrop University, so much smaller. That's why I got lost today. But
it's just sad because you shouldn't have to have that. So many of our professors I know here are like, come to me if you have to have a conversation about accommodations, but they don't know that you shouldn't have to have that conversation with the professor, because the professor has, for whatever reason, the ability to say no, and there are offices on campus, at least here, that will be like, no, we're not asking. And so I'm sorry that you had to, that was your experience.
Yeah, I'm grateful that it has kind of inspired me more to advocate and to look into the law, because you do have federal protections.
Yeah.
And
These professors are breaking the law, and like, it's just insane.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
yeah, it is. And yeah, it's tough. And had it been a class that I really needed, that would have been a concern. What's interesting, it was a disability class. Yeah, it was what was the name of it? It was it was just bizarre, because the syllabus for this class was like, breaking down barriers and disability as social identity and all of this. That, yes, I believe in disability as a social identity. I don't understand how this professor does not believe in reasonable accommodations while they're teaching this course.
I'd like to think that our student assistance and support services office and our office of disability services would, I hope that's not an experience for our students here at the University of Charlotte.
Absolutely.
On a campus this big.
So,
thank you for sharing.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for asking. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Lydia Cosgrave. I'm the program director at Disability Rights and Resources, and I'm Jordan's direct supervisor. And you've done a fabulous job in your presentation.
Thank you.
But I wanted you guys to know, I'm in 1993 and 2001 alumni of UNC.
Lydia, do you want to come up here and speak? So you can be closer to the mic.
Double 49er.
Can you see if I stand? Hi, I'm Lydia Cosgrove, and I'm like I said, a 1993 and 2001 alumni of UNC Charlotte. And I was a graduate student out here. And then it was the program of, I was a health promotion major. Now it's public health, but I had to work with the Office of Disability here for students, because at that time we were able to have the option of taking comprehensive exams or do a research project. And I had never had to work with the Office of Disability before, and and this was a while ago, and I had a very positive experience.
Oh, thank God.
No, and that's why I wanted to speak, because I mean, I needed like a modification to take my comprehensive exams on the computer. Just, I needed a different keyboard and I needed like a little more time just because I typed slower due to a rheumatology problem that was, it's a hidden disability that no one would know I had. And I was able, the Office of Disability helped work with me and the person over the exam for my program. And I had a positive experience. I graduated in 2.5 years with a graduate MS degree. And, you know, I have worked in my field for almost 20 years. So yeah, I just wanted you guys to know that, you know, as students and faculty that, you know, I had a very positive experience while I was here. So yeah, you guys, so don't worry, you guys were wonderful. So
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for coming back.
Yeah, so it is my sincere hope that all students have a very positive experience with their disability office and with their professors, and later with their employers, because it's doable. It's, you know, maybe not as simple, but neither is any kind of work. So, you know, you can succeed in a workplace, and it will not be because you overcome a disability, because you have hidden it well enough or anything like that. It will be because you take ownership of it. It's a part of you, and these are the needs you're going to have as an employee. And you have a what?
I have a plug.
Yes, please.
Hello. You can only see my forehead. Okay, hold on. All right, so we have disability office hours at 1 o'clock, 1 to 2 today. So if anyone on this call or tell your friends, if you have any questions about disclosure or how to have that conversation while on the interview or during the job search application, Marty Musser and I will be hosting disability office hours, and we can talk to you and work with you on an individualized basis. All right, plug over.
Yes, so if you want to meet Marty, talk to her. Oh, you can't see me now. Okay. About an individual experience. She is having disability office hours, and personal opinion, she's fantastic. So please do join for that. It's virtual too. So yeah, I think that about covers it. Unless there's any other questions, or if you really are curious about the details of my disability identity memoir. But the key takeaway is that you know, a good employer will value you, not regardless of, but with your disability. Even if you do not choose to work in an environment like I did, where having a disability is really a big part of what I do. It's important to our work that I am a peer, you know, a person with lived experience myself. And so even if you don't choose to go into the disability field, you have experience to share with them. And to include people with disabilities is to make a commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion. So. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right.